So I just want to say thank you to everyone for coming. And also, this project is near and dear to my heart as a woman, as a patient, as a clinician, as a researcher, and we need your help. So um, I'll go ahead and start. Oh, okay. So women use plants and they use a lot of plants, but we really don't know a lot about all of this plant use. So the reason that we know that a lot of women are using plants is that we see in a wide range of percentage of use depending on different studies. So this is very 15 to 80%. And then today, even just in our own poll, we're seeing 97% of you are reporting use of plants. So that's even higher than that. But one of the best reported statistics is going to be 49 to 80% of women over the age of 20 years report use of dietary supplements. This is from the National Health and Nutrition Examination Survey. And then we also know from other sources, which would be market reports, that the US herbal dietary supplement industry is estimated at $15.5 billion dollars, and that was from 2023. I see that the billion is missing. So, and that is from the ABC's Herbalgram market report, and it's continuing to grow. Now, we have a very incomplete picture based on the surveys that have been performed, and also when the only other data that we have is market data. So we don't know. We know the top plants that women are using, perhaps because we know which plants are highest, like financially, how much money people are spending on them. But we really don't know from women what they're taking. And where are women finding this information? We also don't know that. We don't know what women report reasons for use, their dosage that they're taking, because we have so many different herbal products on the market and also teas, tinctures, people making their own remedies at home. And then we also have safety concerns. And we know that women are concerned about safety. We also don't know all the other forms, other than supplements that are being used, so tea. And then there's conflicting research in regards to who is using supplements, or herbs, shall I say. So within the data, what we see is that women that are using dietary herbal supplements, those women tend to be 65 and older. You can flip the slide. Yeah. So we tend to see that women that are using herbal dietary supplements, these women are 65 years and older. They usually have a higher socioeconomic status and they usually have a higher level of education. We also see that women are report having more chronic illness that are higher users of herbal products. However, that data does not demonstrate other users that may be in more rural areas and may be collecting their own products or ordering tea and using teas. This is predominantly data that is in these market reports, and so it is out of a bottle, what women are using out of a bottle. So what we can say from that data, though, is that women with chronic illness report being higher users of herbal products. They're combining these with both prescription and over-the-counter drugs. So women spend approximately 25% more of their lives in poor health compared to men. This is from the McKinsey report, which came out, and many of you probably have seen. I think the Gates Foundation's been announcing that they'll have grants available for women's health, and there's a number of other foundations that have also announced these funding opportunities, and many of them are based on the McKinsey report that came out. It is quite disheartening to see that women, are spending 25% more of their lives in poor health. And also that half of the women's health burden reflects conditions that affect women disproportionately. So that means that these conditions are affecting women more than they're affecting men, and that's 47%. So we can see here on the slide in this light blue that these are headache disorders. These are examples: autoimmune diseases, depression, etc. 5% here in this darker blue color are related to women specific conditions. So that are maternal, gynecological, and we talk about perimenopause, menopause, pregnancy, lactation, which we saw in the chat why people are coming to this talk today. So, and then 43% of the health burden stems from conditions that we know of. So it's based on current evidence. So it could change, affect women disproportionately or differently. So heart disease, infectious disease such as tuberculosis. And then 4% of the health burden stems from conditions that affect women differently. So atrial fibrillation is an example, as is colon cancer. So why is this all important? So with the health burden that we as women have, and then to also not have as much funding that's going into women's health research. So less than 8% of NIH, the National Institutes of Health funding, goes to women's health research. And also not until 1993 was the National Institute of Health required to include women and minorities in research. This I did not know, and when I saw that statistic, I was very shocked. We all know this, I think, because a lot of you are here today, and it looked like some of the questions in the chat are due to the fact that botanical research is also underfunded. And for the amount of use, that disparity is quite profound. We also have another issue that's coming up, which is misinformation is at an all-time high. So young women in the US report receiving health information from TikTok, whether intentionally or unintentionally. So 65.5% report intentionally going to TikTok to receive health information, and then 92.4% report having received health information because they were on TikTok. 98% of them believed that misinformation is prevalent on TikTok. However, there was a third-party effect where these young women felt that other people, not themselves, were more susceptible to misinformation than they personally were. So now we have another poll about social media. We'd love for you to take.
Yeah, we want to find out from you what you've been marketed to, right? I don't think anyone is free from marketing unless you're not on social media. So please share. We would love to hear more from all of you who's hanging out where and where you're being marketed to on products for your health. Wow, this is great. Thank you so much. We're at 50, 60%. Fantastic. Great. Most of you on Instagram. That's makes sense for this audience for sure. We are at 80%. Great. So I'm going to end this and share the results with all of you so you can see. So you can see that 15% of you go to TikTok, 67% are being marketed to on Instagram, and only 6% of you is none of the above. Have you ever purchased a product? 54% of yes, and 46% of you is no. Thank you so much for sharing this information. This is part of what we're doing, is actually doing these types of surveys, which are going to be much bigger, much wider, much grander than our small survey today. Thank you so much for sharing. I get to jump in. Thank you so much, Tracy, for sharing all of that. I get to jump in and talk about 4 plants that we're potentially going to be doing deeper dives on. Turmeric. This is actually the #1 herb used for pain in these market reports. And we know that with perimenopause and PMS and PCOS, endometriosis, pain is a significant issue with women and hormonal issues, quote unquote, or hormones in general. We understand, most people understand its anti-inflammatory power. We understand there's a lot of good research for curcumin that's in turmeric, and a big part of what BPRA is, or the foundation of BPRA, is whole plant research. So really looking at these herbs, how they're being used, where they're being used is really essential. We understand its use for joint and musculoskeletal health. A lot of this is based on traditional use as well. So looking at the way it's been used traditionally, turmeric is often or historically been used in primarily in Ayurveda. And so we understand its use for helping inflammation, and it actually is quite warming in Ayurveda as well, looking at the energetics. What we need to know more on with turmeric is we need bigger trials. We need to understand its formulations. We need to understand its comparables with how people are using over-the-counter medications, as well as safety labs. It's so prevalent. There's so many turmeric supplements out there. I don't see one turmeric supplement whenever I look at them that doesn't have other herbs included in it for pain. There's a lot more for us to be able to understand in its modern use, and its use of how people want it to work now. And also really understand, is it working for those that are in chronic pain? That's a big question. And obviously an important piece with all of this is sourcing and understand its safety in its modern use as well. One of my favorite herbs, another Ayurvedic herb, is ashwagandha, Withania somnifera. It's one of the best and most popular adaptogens. I think 20 years ago, you say ashwagandha, nobody knew what it was. And today, it's in every functional beverage and even chocolates that you can find today, golden milk, any of these products you see in natural food stores, you're going to see ashwagandha. What is an adaptogen? Adaptogens are herbs and plants that help the body adapt to stress, which means it actually helps you manage cortisol, which is the stress hormone. And it helps the body do that in a number of different ways. And more research even needs to be done on what adaptogens and how they actually work in the body. But we know it helps people. That's the one thing we do understand. And so it does help people with resilience. There's some good research there with resilience. We see that with historical use as well. And that means that if someone's really stressed out, they feel better at managing that stress. It's one of those nervine adaptogens, so it actually helps calm you down versus energizing adaptogens like ginseng would be. So it actually is a helpful adaptogen for sleep, which is where the somnifera comes in its species name. It helps sleep. That's a Latin name for sleep, a psalm for sleep. So it's really good for a calming adaptogen, but we really don't know about these bigger trials on how it's helping perimenopause, how it's helping women in menopause. I know a lot of people are asking the questions is, what's the dosage of how I can use it? How is it interacting with other herbs? And how am I getting the best efficacious dose if I'm using it as a comparable or an analog to some medications specifically for the stress coming with hormonal changes? This is a big question. We would love to understand more about dosage here. Black cohosh, Actea racemosa. Its previous botanical name is one of my favorite things to say, Simicifuga racemosa. Say that 10 times fast. But now it's Actea, so it's not as fun to say, but I love a black cohosh moment. This has a lot of historical use in Native American herb. We actually understand that we don't understand how it works fully as a phytoestrogen, which means a plant-based estrogen. I remember Michael Moore, who's a famous herbalist, saying, we knew it as a phytoestrogen, but now we don't know it as phytoestrogen. Maybe it works this way now. And going back and forth, understanding the research is constantly changing and moving forward. So we do know how it's been used, which is hormonal modulation. It actually has a historical use as for pain. It used to be called rheumatism root. So we know that with perimenopause and menopause, there's a lot of pain associated with those ligaments tightening. And so a great further research for BPRA to consider is really looking at non-hormonal meds and understanding, does it work as well as other HRT medications, or what dosage, what form is it working best in? Because they do see it has some phytoestrogen properties, and exactly what that looks like, there needs a lot more for the research on. And the last but definitely not least herb we're going to talk about today before we jump into the Q&A is Vitex. One of my favorite herbs because there's so many questions about its usage, its dosage, but we know it's efficacious. It's a wonderful herb for menstrual cycle regulation, specifically because it's acting directly on the pituitary gland. It was called chaste berry because monks that gathered it and using it, actually by gathering it for their pepper, it was called monk's pepper, they would actually reduce their libido significantly, so they would actually use it for that. And so we know it's very strong, it's very powerful, even just touching as they were gathering those berries, which are these tiny little seeds, that it would actually help reduce their libido. So for that reason, what dosage is appropriate for people who are using this for fertility, for PCOS? Because it works directly with the pituitary gland, it's quite strong. There's a lot of questions also about its dopaminergic properties, which means how its effect on dopamine response. So the big questions we have are, what are the active comparisons with SSRIs, which is already research that's already sort of being done. We would like further research on that. And how it's working with fertility. That's a big piece of how it's historically been used. It's also the dosage specifics here are vital for Vitex, how it's working at different uses, different use cases, and the dosage specific for that. And now we are curious to hear more from you. Who here has heard about these herbs before? So we would love to hear from you. Which of these herbs have you used for your health, currently or in the past, if you can share? Thank you so much. We have over, wow, you guys are fast. Well done. All right, once we get to 80%, I will share the results. This is all very exciting for all of us. All right, that was quick. All right, turmeric, 96%. This is clear from the data that shows 96% of you use turmeric. Fantastic. 84 ashwagandha, 42 vitex, and 34% black cohosh. Thank you so much for sharing that. That is vital information which matches with a lot of what we're seeing. Tracy, I'm passing it back to you before we continue.
Okay, so we have a solution. We need more information and we need more research. The research that we need to find out real world data on what women are using and how they're using it, where they're getting their information, or where we're getting our information, right? Um, so we're proposing for a cross-disciplinary project, which we've already started organizing, led by BPRA with researchers at the University of Arizona, University of Wisconsin, and other partners. I've been meeting with a group of researchers to try to, not to try, to structure this project in a way that we will get meaningful data that will be able to be used um, for building a working group of researchers, and then that will also be used to build a library and give information to the public and to clinicians and also to researchers. So our focus is whole plant research for women's conditions that are often overlooked. And so the outcomes that we're looking for. So we would like to conduct a robust survey of women in plant use. That is the first step in our proposal. The outcomes of this survey will be published for public health education. They will also be used to form a public library for plants for women's health on the BPRA will lead that on our website. The research that will come out of the survey will also be used to further catalyze research so that we can get answers to these really important questions to be able to guide all of us in our use of plants. We will also conduct media campaigns for public education based on the data that we collect, and physician education, so continuing ed for botanical education and use.
Thank you so much, Tracy. So today we are asking for you to be involved in this process, not just from taking polls and joining us today, but actually be the first donors. This is our very first fundraising event for BPRA, and we're so excited to share with you all about our project. And this is time for our Q&A. We have about 70 of you here. And so we're going to ask for those of you who are interested in asking questions to anyone here on the BPRA staff to put it in the chat. Thank you, Kit, for donating. Thank you so much. To put it in the chat. And if you like the question in the chat, then like it. So we can see a lot of people hearting questions, liking questions. And so we would love to answer as many questions as possible today before the end. What questions do we have today? Thoughts on herbs for fertility? Much appreciated, Marguerite. That's always a really good question, is fertility. Yeah. Someone's asking, how to use Vitex for perimenopause? That's a great question as well. Any interactions that we should be aware of and consider plants for perimenopause support? Of course. Would love to learn more about herbs for perimenopause. What might be contraindicated? Yeah, we got a like there. Great. A couple likes for our fertility question. Perimenopause, of course. Herbs for migraines, hormonal cycles. That's, I know, a big problem for a lot of folks with migraines. Yeah. Insomnia, menopause. Thank you, Robin, for sharing. Insomnia, man, that's a tough one in menopause, isn't it? Yeah. All right. These are some good questions. So right now we have best source for finding side effects. Okay. Yeah. Great. I think we can start. While you please keep adding questions here, and we'll have Rosa, who's here helping support, monitoring the questions, but interactions that we can be aware of considering plants for perimenopause support. I'm happy to start, and then Tracy, if you can chime in, that would be fantastic. The herbs that I know, the biggest interaction that I've seen with my clients, but also in the research, is people that are taking hormone replacement therapy or any type of estrogen and progesterone should be very careful about the herbs that are also used for hormonal regulation in order to do two things. One, to have the medications work as best as they can, and two, to understand what is actually working. The most obvious interactions are also herbs like ginkgo and St. John's wort, which do cross the blood-brain barrier and should not be used with any hormone medication, even the pill, even the birth control pill. St. John's wort, there's some really good data to show that St. John's wort can actually reduce the efficaciousness of any hormone medication. So if you're using St. John's wort in one of your formulas, it's often used for depression and nervous system pain, mostly, and rejuvenating the nervous system. People don't often know that, and they're using it in connection with some essentially what we consider direct-to-customer hormone companies. So right now there's so many. I am actually curious if we could do a poll right now, is how many people here have been marketed direct-to-consumer hormone medications that aren't going through their OBGYN, often because they aren't getting support from their OBGYN. And so going to these companies that are startups that are marketed directly to women in menopause that might not be taking into account some of the herbs and supplements that people are taking. So that's the major pieces that I see without knowing you as an individual, which is there's always a caveat that talk to your doctor with any of this information, understand what you're taking, and make sure you are looking at all of the supplements, herbs, and the medications that you're taking when you're taking them. And everything's an individual conversation. Tracy, do you have more to add to that?
No, I think you did a great job. I second that seeing healthcare providers and consulting with integrative medicine doctors, naturopathic doctors, herbalists, I think is a great way to learn more information that's personalized. I also have to say that one thing that I am seeing with the chat right now is all of these questions are fantastic. Like, we need more information so that we can answer these questions. There should be a place that you can go and you will be able to have an answer to any of these. And there are some databases, but they are you're required to spend quite a bit of, like, natural medicine database is one. There are others for some of the side effects and contraindications. However, I do think that for each individual, they should contact their healthcare provider.
Great. David, I know Dr. David Kiefer wanted to share as well. Thank you for unmuting earlier. I'd love to hear more from you.
Thanks, everybody. I'm going to echo what you say is that, these questions, and the answers to these questions, it's complicated. It's very individualized in integrative health. And I see some of my integrative health colleagues in the audience here, which is just so wonderful. We spend a lot of time with our patients to delve deep into their history and talk about the specifics of their pharmaceutical regimens and the dietary supplements they're interested in. I do consult NatMed Pro, which is a database recently renamed from Natural Medicines, and it went through some other iterations, but I feel like that's a good go-to for some of the interactions that we should all pay attention to. I don't find it as useful for some of the dosing. And so then I have to toggle to other resources and try to find this historical use data or some more of the clinical experience from my colleagues in order to answer these questions. So this reaffirms what Laura and Tracy, you've been emphasizing, which is that we need more info about these specific plants that we talked about today and many other plants in order to be able to provide this counseling. And we really envision the BPRA website in the future as a kind of one-stop shopping, not actually literally shopping necessarily, but like figuratively, like a place you can go and you can trust the info. It's coming straight out of the research circles from researchers that will contact all over the place, which we've already started to do. So I think hopefully that will get us these concrete, specific answers that you can use in concert with your healthcare practitioners.
Thank you so much, Dave, for sharing all of that. Thank you so much. And I know that it's hard sometimes to find integrative physicians in your neck of the woods. That can be challenging. So we would love to be able to support you in any way we can through BPRA. And that is this project moving forward, is having this library, as David said, and hopefully a better source for this information that everyone can access, clinicians and the public can access this. Another question we have in the chat that gets the most likes is insomnia and menopause. That's a tough one. That's a really tough one. I'm happy to share a little bit. What I've seen is that I know a big piece of it is, I know this might be speaking to a lot of people who probably have a lot of stress in their life, but sleep hygiene is a really important piece here. And I know it's not an herbal product recommendation, but I know putting down your screen for 2 hours before bed and having a good meditation practice for before bed sometimes is one of the best things to do first. And in integrative medicine, it's mind, body, spirit, it's practice, it's habits, it's lifestyle. And I know that's a really big piece for folks. I'm not saying that waking up in the middle of the night is due to those screens, but that's been a big piece that I know a lot of research has been done on. Dr. David Kiefer, Tracy Pantuso, have you seen any plants and herbs working for insomnia with menopause that you can share about?
Tracy, how are you feeling about this?
I'm going to hand it over to you. I mean, I think that this is a great question, and I think we can throw different things out. And I can also say that sometimes those herbs aren't working very well, or for some people, whether or not it's the actual supplement that's being used, and we don't know the quality of that. Um, it could also be that it's not the right product or the right herb for people. Sometimes black cohosh doesn't work for some people. So there are a lot of different factors. And then I'm going to give it to David.
Well, I mean, this is a long discussion. Across demographics, mild insomnia, which is just a very medicalized way to define some level of insomnia, which is still really troublesome for folks. It is rampant. It is for a variety of reasons, from overall stress levels um, to screen time and other, ways that our nervous system kind of gets revved up. There's all kinds of reasons why our sleep cycles are off in the modern world. So, this is a tough one, and to swim upstream against this requires, I would say, a classic integrative approach. It's multifactorial for most of my patients, and there's no necessarily a silver bullet out there. I love turning to the herbal world for this. I find if we get the right combination of some of these more sedative or nervine type plant medicines, that it can achieve a patient's goal for healthy sleep with is healthy both quantity and quality of sleep without that carryover effect in the morning that I see with some of the pharmaceuticals that I could prescribe. And the plants are varied and wonderful. And one thing that I love is how these plants start to address, multi-systems in ways that pharmaceuticals don't. So a classic sedative plant that I turn to a lot would be lemon balm, which at the same time as it's helping with the GABA hormone in our brain, which is the calming hormone in our brain, it's also toning your GI tract and getting that brain gut connection to be enhanced and improved, if we can say that. So, you start to think about these plants that are working on multi-systems that are helping the whole person in really unique ways. So you've got your lemon balms and your hops, really interesting plants to think about. Certainly the calming plants that most of us are familiar with, but infusions of chamomile flowers certainly can be enough for some folks. Aromatherapy with lavender, capsules of valerian root. I mean, I can go on and find some really wonderful sedative plants that can help folks. And sometimes it's the combination. And there's some really good reputable brands that have combined those into a tea format or even in tincture format. So, gosh, I mean, again, this is a nice way to think about how to individualize a treatment for somebody and to draw from some of these different mechanisms of action that we know about to achieve their goals. So there's some knowns there, certainly some unknowns for interactions or for certain specific coexisting medical conditions, which again is something that we hope that our organization can chip away at and provide you all who are here and all of your friends and colleagues with higher quality information going forward.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Dave. I'm just going to add passion flower to that as well because it's one of my favorites and it's so beautiful. And it's such a great herb for so many folks with nervous system disorders. But lemon balm, hops, valerian, all these nervous system supporting herbs. Thank you so much for jumping in there, Dave. We have time for one more question before we end today. And we have a question about migraines caused by hormones and hormonal cycles. And I know that's a very big issue for folks with migraines. I think, Dave, I'm just going to parrot what you were just saying. It's an individual journey. And people with chronic pain, I've seen a lot of different people using different herbs for that. And so I'm curious, Dave, if you want to share any of your experience with migraines connected to hormones, and Tracy, obviously.
Oh gosh, I don't know that I can provide some, useful general advice here. That's a tough one, and some of the cyclical migraines can be really debilitating. I have had some success with not, working on the hormonal piece, but more on the migraine piece with some of the herbals and supplements that we use for that, including riboflavin, even magnesium as a headache medicine, and butterbur, and it has to be a butterbur extract, not your raw rhizome butterbur. So some of those plants I found useful. I have turned to the Vitex as a stabilizing hormonal, kind of overall general hormonal treatment for cyclical migraines. And that is, for me, and the way that I think about some of the plant treatments I recommend, that's still in that realm of clinical experience. I'll check in with some colleagues about it, try to get some advice about dosing and products. And that's a little different than the quality of research that I have to draw on for butterbur or many other herbals. So another good example, I would love to have some really high quality clinical trials on Vitex for cyclical migraines so that I can tell my patients exactly what dose to use. How long is it best as a preventive, which I have the hunch that it is, as opposed to a treatment. But I am not, please correct me if I'm wrong, somebody out there, but I am not familiar with really high quality, large clinical trials that will help us answer that question. I still recommend it, but I'm drawing on clinical experience and anecdote, which has some power itself, but is not what BPRA is shooting for. So we're shooting for improving the quality of data so that we can answer that question, which is very important and comes up a lot in my clinical practice.
Tracy, would you like to share a little bit?
No, I'm good. Dave did a great job. I agree with him.
Thank you, Dr. Kiefer. It's so important for you all to be asking these questions, and I'm so grateful for the honest just sharing from these doctors that we have on our board, and many of you are on our scientific board that are in this audience today, that there's a lot of questions that need to be answered. And this is the reason why this initiative is happening with BPRA. So we can actually answer these questions and do the research, continue to do the research. One of the pieces we want to find out if things don't work. That would be great for us to see, well, this is actually not that strong. There's an alternative that people are not as aware of. These are part of the research process. So I'm really excited to get started on this project so we can have all of this information available to all of you. As one person asked, where can we find this information? That's our goal, is to be able to be the resource without having to have a subscription or to be a doctor to access this information. Actually, that we'll have a public library for you to be able to access at all times. I know, just to follow up, there is a lot of people have questions about HRT and MHT, menopause hormone therapy. And I think that question that's being asked here is it safe to use? Can I use it? Should I use it? That's a big question that I know a lot of people have. And I know a lot of you probably walked in with that. I do understand that there's really kind of three main groups of people, groups of women that are asking that question. One are women that can't use it. Their doctor said they're not a good candidate for it, so are looking for alternatives. That's a big reason why a lot of this plant research is vital, is strong alternatives. And then a group of people that don't want to use it, don't feel comfortable with using pharmaceuticals and really looking for strong botanical use. And then the third is people that are interested in using it but want a more integrative approach and are comfortable using pharmaceuticals, or maybe even want to, but do want to do botanicals as well. So those three main categories are all the people that we want to talk to and everyone that we want to be able to share this information, whether you're using it or not. And I don't think there's one answer for, is it appropriate for you? I can't say that for everyone, but that you will have to figure that out yourself with your primary care physician, and make sure you understand you're getting the right studies and the right research on your own health before you start using HRT or MHT. And I would love for Tracy and David to chime in about the use of HRT.
Laura, I think, that really well said. Any treatment that we recommend, whether it's conventional or allopathic, integrative, so-called, or, I hate to throw botanicals into an alternative category because I'd rather integrate them into all of our lives. But this is a risk-benefit decision. Any treatment, from the simplest herb to a change in diet to start exercising to, thinking about HRT, there are benefits for some folks, and then there are risks to keep in mind, and that is very individual. So certainly some of my patients that, have a history of hormone sensitive cancers, you need to be very careful, and or completely avoid taking substances that could, trigger a recurrence or a metastasis or some sort of, adverse outcome of the therapy that they might be going through. So, the risks in those situations are very important to take into account. Other people don't have those risks, and it's worth thinking about the benefits that the short-term use of HRT might carry for them. And I will say that the needle on this changes and has changed over the years depending on new and emerging research. So, stay up to speed on that with your own searching. And again, that's a place that we hope BPRA will come in, like serve as a role of where you can find good information that's up to date with the most recent research. But those of us in clinical practice also go to continuing education and try to stay up on, is HRT indicated and for which age groups? And there has been some change in that over the years. So, turn to your healthcare provider. Um, Hopefully everybody has one. I know in my community, the access for a primary care doc is really, really tough right now, but we hope everybody has access to a good primary care doc who's, up to date on the literature and can help you with that risk benefit analysis for whatever the indication or intervention might be.
Thank you so much, Dr. David Kiefer. We are not able to answer all the questions in the chat today, but we want to thank you all for being here, and that we will reschedule with Dr. Andrew Weil once he's able to for another event on plants for women's health. But I'm very grateful for all of you for being present. We will share all of these the polls with all of you so you have them. We'll share our slides with you. And we will also be sharing a survey. If you do have questions that you want to be answered, please share with us. This project is vital that you are all involved in it. This is where these big surveys come in. We want to hear what you need, what you want, what research you want. So thank you all for being here. Have a beautiful rest of your day. Thank you. Thank you. Have a great one. Thank you so much. Take care.